understand the emotional driver of the purchase, what they really want in the end. It's like Ted Levitt, who was a professor of marketing, says, when people buy a drill, they don't want the drill, they want the hole.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
Man, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the high-level relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving. Today our guest is Liz Wainger, and here are three things you want to know about Liz before we start. She started out as a reporter and a writer, so this will be interesting. For 21 years, she's been running her own company, Wainger Group, focusing on strategic communication, and she wrote a book called The Prism of Value: Connect, Convince, and Influence When It Matters Most. And what you really need to know is I invited her on this podcast because I think she's going to give us a very fresh and interesting perspective on this word called value. Welcome, Liz.
It's great to be here with you this afternoon.
I'd like to start with, how did you get into pricing, but you're not in pricing. So how did you get to this concept of value being so important in the world?
So I come at it through a communications lens. And what often happens is that people, when they're trying to market their products or communicate about their brand, they tend to speak in terms of what is important to them or what they value, instead of what other people value. And so the people that they're trying to reach. And so I had a light bulb, and if I can tell you a quick story,
please,
that will explain how I got to this notion of prism of value. My brother passed away a few years ago, very unexpectedly, in his sleep. And when we were cleaning out all his effects and so on, my other brother called me from the bank and said, "You are not going to believe what's in Dave's safe deposit box." And so I'm thinking I can retire, that there's a whole lot of money that, I'm thinking island, I'm buying an island, whatever. And what was in his safe deposit box were attaboys from the boss, pictures of cards from people, funny things that friends had sent him. And he valued those things so much that he put them in a safe deposit box because he was living in a neighborhood that wasn't that great, I guess. But he didn't want them to get lost. And so I started to think, well, when we communicate with other people, what do we say about ourselves that's so valuable to somebody else that they'd want to put it in a metaphorical safe deposit box? And that's when I started to say, well, how then could we apply that a prism of value in the way that we relate to other people, whether we're marketing a product or whether we're just trying to be friends with people? And that led me to this whole concept of a prism of value. And I can explain that in a little bit.
Oh, we will definitely get there. I absolutely love that story. And what I love about that story is you started out by saying, oh, here's what I think is valuable. And that isn't really what your brother thought was valuable. So different people value different things pretty dramatically. And then to pile on, since I care about products and you care a lot more about companies and messages, from a product perspective, go look at anybody's webpage. 90% of the web pages out there, we're talking about our features. We're talking about the things that we do, that we're good at. And that's certainly not what we're going to put in our safety deposit box, or our customers are going to put in their safety deposit box. So fabulous story.
And what I was going to say is that people will pay more, and you know this, for things that they really value, right? People will pay more for things that, I'm now going to date myself, but the pet rock. Where a guy took a rock and he put it in a box and he called it a pet rock. And people paid for that because it fulfilled some emotional need for them or desire. And so they were willing to pay for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what is it that you do today that has to do with value?
So what I do that has to do with value is to help companies and executive leadership figure out what it is about what they offer or who they are, in case of leadership branding, that taking what they feel is valuable or what they have to offer and helping them frame it in a way that the people that they want to buy that product or engage in that product or feel good about that company see that value as well. But it's putting it in terms that matter to the people you're trying to engage, not just what you want to say. So for example, and you were talking about websites, so many sites have what I call list speak. We have between us 90 years of experience. We went to these colleges. We won these awards. So you're trying to say, yeah, I'm credible. But that's not necessarily what your customer expects you to be credible, right? They expect you to have a good product. So then then why does that matter to me? And so it's really helping people pull out of them and marry what they have to offer with what people need, and looking at it from the perspective of, in what way are you making someone's life better, easier? What way are you taking away something that's difficult? And there are flip sides of the messaging coin, because making someone's life better is more aspirational. Taking away pain is about protection. And depending on where your audience is, sometimes you have to look at both sides of that coin, and knowing when to do that and how to do that, so that people see what you want them to see about what you're offering.
Yeah, when I'm coaching customers on products and product value, I often, in fact, almost always say, look, we're going to fill out this thing called a value table where we're going to understand what's your product or what's your feature. I don't care what it is. And then what problem do you solve with that? And what's the result a customer should expect to get from that? And so I could see that as the pain and the pleasure,
Right.
the positive and the negative side of that one problem. So it's consistent. Now I focus on products. I get the feeling that, let's pick a big company, IBM, right?
Mhm.
So I might help IBM deal with a computer, deal with a specific product that they're going to go sell. And yet you're there saying, IBM, here's why you want to buy from IBM. Is that true or not?
That's true. And it might be, and here's why you want to buy that thing from IBM. So,
Okay.
because, so I can't really disclose who it is, but I am working with a fairly large company right now. And it is around a particular aspect of their business. And it's a side of their business. It's a new part of their business that they're not used to. They haven't, it's a new area for them. Let's put it that way, new category for them. And so one is first explaining or helping them message around why them in this new category, and pulling from their experience and what they bring to the table in other lines of business, and how this is an extension of that line of business. And then specifically why, what's differentiating, what's interesting, and how are we making the world better by doing this, or how are we making the target audience's world better, and what are we taking away that has been really challenging and difficult, and that they haven't been able to solve. And so it's really helping them put this new product line into context, and to make sure that that context matches and amplifies what they've already been saying about themselves. So it's actually, it sounds really simple, and it's more than just pains and gains. it's about stepping back and really understanding your customer base and the external world and what's going on there, and trying to stay ahead of where the trends are and where what your customer may be feeling now, but what they might be feeling 6 to 8 months from now. So it's a combination of both.
Okay, this sounds really hard and fascinating. What's the process that you go through to try to figure out what is it that your customers value, your market values? How do you do that?
So first we start with what they think is important, right? I mean, what do they feel is what they want to communicate? What do they feel is unique about their product? Oftentimes they can't answer that. They think they know. And then we often we'll start by doing some one-on-one interviews with likely subjects or past clients. And we like to hear the words that the targets use. And sometimes what the targets say they value is not at all what they think they're selling. And you know that.
Do you mean sometimes they actually do match?
Yeah, very rarely. And then we'll do things like, we'll do surveys, but we also will do what we call a Prism of Value 360. And we actually, it's a little questionnaire, and we have them, whether it's a team, an individual, but we have them fill out, well, depending on who are all the different audiences that are going to be involved in delivering this product and using this product, what would they say? Are the positives and negatives? What are you taking away? What are you adding? And then you start to see themes that emerge through that questionnaire, and asking your clients or your potentials the same thing. Certain themes start to emerge, and you see where the alignment, almost like a Venn diagram, where's the intersection, and that's where you start. That's where you then say, okay, let's look at the how we then deal with that and frame that. And it's really important. And you can do I really like to do interviews and focus groups because I want to hear the words. And you can do, obviously, you're only reaching smaller numbers that way. And then usually we do a larger survey based on what we've heard from that. But there's no substitute for actually seeing where is the passion. Do people get really excited? Or are they just sort of flat talking about it? Because so it's not just the words, but also the tone, and where you can see that people are getting excited or not, or that we're asking questions about what would you use? Now, I always use this example, and I think a lot of people have, if Steve Jobs had asked people, if you want one of these phones, right, that has email and you can take pictures and you can do all these things, I don't know that, a lot of people would say, yeah, I want that. But they weren't really selling a phone. They were selling an ability for you to connect when you want, where you want, with whomever you want to get what you want. That's really what the iPhone is about. It's the convenience and so on. It's not about, yes, it's about the camera, and yes, the speed and all of those kinds of things, but it's really about connection. And they were marketing it that way. Obviously, it's been really successful.
I think that's spot on. What, when you do this work, are you trying to get to a single value statement, or are you trying to get to multiple different value statements depending on who the market segment is or who the audience is that we're talking to?
So this is always a question that people ask about messaging or creating a a messaging platform or a messaging architecture or positioning platform, however you want to call it. I feel it's really important that what most people do is they message from the bottom of a pyramid. They message about all the facts, the figures, the stories, the customer stories, they put those out there, but they haven't put them in a wrapper, a bigger wrapper that ties it all together. And yes, you have to customize your message, your value statement to different audiences. But the way I do messaging is we use a triangle. And this is something I actually developed many years ago for media interviews, that we would put in the middle of the triangle, the core overarching main message, 3 supporting messages, 1 word on each point of the triangle, so that when people went into a TV interview or whatever, they could have that picture in their head and know that depending on where you customize, depending on what is most interesting to your audience, you lead with different points of the triangle. But the underlying message about what makes this product tick or why you want to use this should be true according to all your audiences. It may be that, I mean, the clearest example I can give is we were working with a group that was fighting homelessness. So they thought that their message was, that their message was getting a home for everybody. When we talked to people that they were helping, one woman said it this way. She said, they didn't get me out of the cold. They got me out of the situation that got me into the cold in the first place. So the message wasn't so much about finding homes. It was more about building independence, building self-sufficiency. And the way that they did that was provided housing, provided training, and provided connection to a community so they didn't feel lonely. Now, donors could use that same message. We're about, see, you give your money, you're helping people become independent. You're doing that by helping them build a home, you're supporting training, and you're connected, and they're connected to a community. So it worked for donors, it worked for potential residents, it worked for the government, the regulator, agencies that provided funding. And it was a powerful message about building independence and self-sufficiency, as opposed to just focusing on, we find people homes.
Yeah, so it sounds to me in that example that you said we found a single high-level message that truly resonated, and that's independence. And then we found 3, let's call them supporting activities or supporting pieces of evidence that we're going to lean to all the time to say, here's how or here's why. Anything magical about the number 3? Well,
I just think that, you can have 4 and you can have 5, but the thing is, people will remember 3. It's a lot easier to remember 3. It's not that you, and underneath those big pillars, those 3 points of the triangle, there are sub messages, to be sure. But we live in a world where we're over communicating. We are getting so much information. So the ability to cut through and really get to the core and simplify is so important, because people have very short attention spans. And the other thing that people forget is that just because you message one way, let's say on social media, and another way in advertising, you don't think people see both messages at some point. There's what I call the porosity of information. So you want to be consistent, because it's the consistency that builds equity, attention equity, brand equity, value equity over time. And when people have so many different messages, people don't really know what it is. So, and it's hard to find that overarching, sometimes it's really hard to find that overarching message. And sometimes that's where when you get into promoting a particular part of a product, looking at a different product line or a different division, it's okay, understanding what's the value of that, and then tying back to, but it comes from here, which gives it gravitas, credibility, whatever. Now, sometimes, sometimes it just depends. Sometimes when you're talking about a really, really big organization, people don't really care about the mothership, right? So you have to really understand when is it valuable, makes sense to invoke the mothership, which may provide you with credibility, authenticity, authority, whatever. So you really have to understand the audience and what you're trying to do. And that's where there's no one size fits all. And you may start out with one approach, and then you may have to shift it depending on what's happening in your world and with other trends.
Okay, Liz, I have to say that I absolutely love what you just described to us. And I think I'm going to go change my entire marketing now to, to 3 things. I got it. Right?
Yeah.
And,
I was once working with an incredibly brilliant man, and he would write these position papers, and they'd have 10 ideas. And I'd say, let's get it down to 5. No, I would say, let's get it down to 3. And then we would negotiate to 5. I said, because your audience is what are they going to remember? And you really have to think about and this is where we apply a lot of the things that we've learned in communication to the marketing mix, is to say, look, if there's one thing that people are going to remember, if there's one thing you want people to take away, what is it? What's the most important thing? And people, it's a lot easier. People don't do this because it's really hard. And it also means that you have to leave things out. You have to make decisions about, well, this is really what's important. It's not that the other thing isn't important, but it's not what we're going to emphasize. It's not what's going to lead our discussion of why we're valuable.
I think that makes sense. It's okay to leave something out. That reminds me of when I coach people about market segmentation. I say, look, you got to pick a market segment and go focus on it. And they say, yeah, but what if someone else who's not in my market segment needs my product? And I say, well, that's really easy. If they come to you and say, can I buy your product? You say, yes, it's okay. It's just not who we're marketing to. It's not who we're targeting.
Right. And that's right. And you have to start in one, you really have to focus. Because there's just people are just so overwhelmed with communication. We have more ways to communicate now than we ever have had in human history, and we're doing a poorer job of it.
So in other words, if I expect anybody to listen to me, I have to say something that truly resonates with them.
Correct. And the way you do that is by asking them questions and taking the time to understand what might resonate. And, I always use this example when I talk about this is I put a picture of a cupcake up and I say, I know, because marketing people know this, that if I want to lose weight, I should not eat that cup. I probably shouldn't eat that cupcake. But it's a lot easier for me to simply eat the cupcake than to change the way I see that cupcake and the way I think about that cupcake and how that cupcake relates to me. And that's what we're talking about with this. You mentioned it earlier about websites. And if you go even on sites that are produced by really smart marketing people, they are all about the company and not about the company and me. So, now sometimes people want that. They want to know, well, I just want to know, do you do this? Do you, I want to check a box or whatever. But the most successful communication really speaks to my emotional need, my aspiration, what I'm really scared about. So if you can help me look good, if you can help me look good, I mean, and I'm not just physically, but just look good. If you can help me, this has been a real challenge, or it takes too much time, and you can save me time, and all of those things, but really speaking to what might I be experiencing, as opposed to, I have this great thing and you should buy it. And that's how most people approach the way they talk about themselves.
Yeah, I like to say it as experts buy features because they know what they need or want. Very few people are experts. And so the rest of us are looking for benefits, or translate that into my world, would you please? So that we can make decisions.
I once went in to do a pitch to an organization, and I walked in and they said, "Is it just you? You don't have like a whole team of people?" And I said, "No, we're going to have a conversation." They said, "Do you have a PowerPoint?" I said, "No, it's a PowerPoint free zone." They said, "Oh, okay." They said, "Well, tell us about your firm." And I said, "Well, I'm going to tell you about our firm. But before I do that, I'm going to tell you what I know about you." And they went, "What?" I said, "Well, I talked to about 4 of your clients. Do you want to know what they said about you?" And they said, yeah. And so I talked about that. And then I said, "Now I'm going to tell you." So they identified these things. "Now I'm going to tell you about our firm and how we can help you bridge this gap that they didn't even know they had. They thought they needed one thing. And so again, it was because I started with them.
Yep.
And we ended up getting the work, but it was not the way they were hoping that, they were expecting we would stand up there with the PowerPoint and I'd have like 5 people there and we'd all go around and talk about our multiple years of experience and blah, 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 blah. So,
yeah.
And I didn't intend to start that way, but it just hit me. I had talked to people to understand if we even wanted to work with them. And it just hit me at that moment. So that's how I do a lot of my presentations now, my pitches.
Nice. And what's funny, I didn't even realize this or think about this until you just told that story. As a buyer, we think we're experts and we're looking for feature information, even though we have no idea how to translate it, how to use that to make a really good decision.
Right.
And so we don't know what we want.
We think we know, based on what our experience has been or what other people have told us.
Yeah.
And so a big part of, and I think everybody should think about this, that no matter what your product is or service is, that you should be coming at it from the perspective of, I want to help these people get better at whatever it is that they want to do. Not that I want to get the work. But if you go, this is Prism of Value, where you say, I want to help you be successful. So let me listen to, okay, so let me hear what you're saying, and then say, okay, this is what you think you want, but maybe you want to, and that's doing that through questions.
Yep. Perfect.
Probing questions, or not threatening questions, because then people run away. You don't want to threaten people.
Right. Right. Liz, this has just been absolutely fabulous, but we are running out of time. Sure. I am going to ask my standard last question, even though you're not a pricing person. What's one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Understand the emotional driver of the purchase, what they really want in the end. It's like Ted Levitt, who was a professor of marketing, says, when people buy a drill, they don't want the drill, they want the hole. They want the hole because they want to hang grandma's picture. So you have to understand that what they really want is grandma's picture on the wall because they loved grandma, and you're helping them do that.
Nice. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for your time today, Liz. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
They can contact me at liz@waingergroup.com. That's WAINGER group, or on our website, which is also waingergroup.com.
And we'll also have that in the show notes. So it'll be easy to find as well. All right, episode 136 is all done. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? They're very valuable to us. And finally, if you have any questions or comments about the podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.